Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Seaman. Thank you so much for inviting me, Martha. Before I begin, I just want to just say to you, thank you for, I think, over 35 years of advocacy and awareness and education for dystonia. So I'd like to give you a virtual standing ovation for the amount of work that you've done over the years, because you've put together such an amazing support group and you've worked with so many people over the years that I just first want to just acknowledge you, because we all think that you do such amazing work, and that needs to be known by many people, and you have an amazing group. And I just want to say thank you first off for that, and for inviting me to be here today, which I hope people find helpful. The program I'm going to be doing is called Managing the Daily Challenges of Dystonia. Um, I have So it didn't work there. Okay. I'm actually not in San Diego, as we were talking about before. I am in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I am a long way from San Diego. I am directly across the country, almost a straight line across from you on the other coast. So I'm come a long way, but not just a long way in terms of the number of miles I am from you, but a very long way in my journey with dystonia for the last 22 years. Some of the information I'll be going over today, some of you may be familiar with and have seen before, but hopefully, if you have, it's a reminder of some of the things that we can do to help ourselves on a daily basis. And for those that are new to this, hopefully the information will be helpful as we go along. As you'll see, I have come quite a long ways with my dystonia. I'm going to go over how it first manifested in more detail, but I first wanted to show you a pictorial view of my journey for the last 20 years, 20 plus years really, and where I am today. I am not cured. I still have plenty of symptoms. They're just not as severe as they once were. And I'm going to share the things that I did to get to where I am today. But I wanted to just give you a little bit of a pictorial view of the journey I've been on. So here's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to talk about my personal journey with dystonia and pain, the life impact in general of dystonia and pain, but also how it has impacted my life specifically, the various things that help me most and what I do on a daily basis to manage symptoms, talk about stress and emotions and the role that they play. And of course, along with that, we need to discuss the mind-body connection. And then we're going to get into some self-care strategies. So how did dystonia physically manifest in my life? And I showed these pictures before, but here are two enlarged photos of how it was at its worst. So for me, it began with a very slight kind of a head tilt that only I could notice. And it progressed within months. And again, I'll go over this in more detail shortly, to about a 45-degree locked angle towards my right shoulder. And you can see on the picture on the right, the severe muscle contractions in my shoulder and my neck, where it was even pulling off my torso, where it was curved down, and I developed scoliosis as a result of all of this. And these pictures I included because the left picture shows a very common thing for people with cervical dystonia, with a raised shoulder on the affected side because of those shortened muscles. And on the right side, this is a picture of me. I was going through a period of time whenever I woke up in the morning, after I took a shower, I came out, and for some reason my body was in full spasticity. And here I am, merely trying to peel a banana to make a smoothie for breakfast, and I was moving super slow motion because of the unbelievable full body, upper body, I should say, contractions. So let me back up a little bit. Prior to dystonia, I was a very active person involved in basically, you name it, in terms of sports, as well as social activities and work and all sorts of other types of things, traveling, business, etc. So I was a very active person involved in many things. And back then, I didn't realize the freedom that the health brought me. And even to this day, I still take for granted many of the things that I can do. But I think it's human nature to kind of be this way, but I never realized just how good life was until it was kind of taken from me. So to go over my dystonia symptoms, as I mentioned, it began in July 2001. As I mentioned, I had minor tightness in my neck with some restricted movements and a very, very slight head tilt. My muscles actually began to feel weak versus strong, which is kind of strange because with dystonia, oftentimes it's because they feel strong. But at first for me, it almost felt like I didn't have neck muscles to support my head. So whenever I walked, my head would flop to the right and then it would pop back to the center and flop to the right and back to center. And then of course I had this very similar posture that we all have when I was sitting at the computer or anywhere I was sitting. And at the time I had just gone back to graduate school. I was in business for about 6 or 7 years and went back to graduate school to get my master's degree in counseling. And I had to sit like this all day in class because my head would constantly pull over to the right. Within months, it progressed to my head constantly pulling to the right from the unrelenting muscle contractions in my neck. And in about 4 months, the pain began to set in my base of my skull, very common area for pain, in my neck and my shoulders and my back. It became so severe that for more than 5 or 10 minutes of sitting or standing, I had to lay down. And by January 2002, so about 6, 7 months later, I was literally bedridden. I rolled around on my floor all day long. I only got up to get food, which I brought back to the floor and I shoveled in my mouth to eat, or to go to the bathroom, and that was it. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I went through many different doctors, and I'm going to have a slide here that will show the different doctors I saw. I eventually self-diagnosed in February 2002, which was confirmed by a movement disorder neurologist at Duke University. At the time, all I felt was intense pain. It was like somebody had a drill in the base of my skull, neck, and shoulders, while at the same time being hit with a hammer. So I was rolling around on the floor with these kinds of sensations in my body. So my path to diagnosis, of course, I said I was self-diagnosed. I went through chiropractors, MDs, PAs, sports med doctors, nurses, PTs, neurologists. Neurologists even didn't know what was wrong at the time, shockingly. Massage therapists, acupuncturists, and I self-diagnosed, as I mentioned. Now, the general life impact of dystonia, which we can all relate to, is that everything pretty much changes. Your relationships, work, social connections, all of your everyday activities basically are affected. We deal with embarrassment, isolation, anxiety, depression. That being said, I just want to first say, I want to just add something I hadn't planned on, is just to acknowledge all of you that are here today, because taking this step is a big thing when we're dealing with something that feels so isolating and we are embarrassed by perhaps our appearance. And even if we don't have very, very visual symptoms, sometimes what we feel on the inside, we think others can see on the outside, which isn't really true, but that's how it can feel. So for those of you that are here and for anyone who's ever involved in anything whatsoever, I just want to acknowledge you for the efforts that you make. And it's really hard. We're all at different stages in that journey. But I just want to acknowledge you for every effort that you make, because it's such an important thing. And the symptoms, of course, they can disrupt sleep and all other types of activities. Now, we may, because of all this, avoid social situations and feel very uneasy in public. We're often also very much misunderstood by others, especially those closest to us, which can be very, very heartbreaking. So we deal with a lot of shame, anger, depression. Now, the impact on my life, I had to drop out of graduate school, I had to stop working. And as I mentioned, I rolled around on my floor all day in pain. I literally lost all my money and savings, and I even lost some of my friends and my family. I was 30 years old at the time, had to move back in with my parents because I couldn't do anything without help. So here they were, retired parents, thinking they were going to enjoy playing golf and going to the beach and everything. They then now had to become caregivers for their youngest son, who was disabled, which they never expected to have happen. So it affected my family in great ways. And I know they're watching, so Mom and Dad, thank you for everything you did for me. I don't want to cry because if I talked about it too much, I will. Dealt with severe anxiety and depression. I was incredibly uncomfortable just to leave the house. Sometimes just opening the door was scary, just for fear that somebody might see me, because I was afraid of having to go and speak with them because the pain was so difficult and I was so embarrassed by my appearance. I ended up gaining 150 pounds from being sedentary and having a very self-destructive lifestyle. And I'm going to go over what some of those things were. And I was, as I showed in those previous pictures, I was almost a professional athlete in 3 different sports. And here I was now, the complete opposite of that. Because I felt like my life was over. I didn't care about anything anymore, and I lost my will to live. So this is how I coped originally with dystonia, pain, anxiety, and depression. I grieved, I cried, I yelled, I retreated from the world, as I mentioned. I drank alcohol to medicate the emotional and physical pain, which I know is not uncommon for a lot of us. And I had a horrible diet and I gained 150 pounds. Here I am, sort of appearing to look happy, but underneath, I am not happy at all. And there, of course, is my treatment of choice, which was a lot of alcohol. So I continued to grow. This was my birthday, January 2004. I was 33. It was a birthday party my mom threw for me. And as you can see, I'm drinking beer again, and I'm getting larger and larger by the day with the horrible diet and lifestyle. And again, here I'm smiling, but inside I'm dealing with some tremendous, tremendous pain. Fast forward to December 2005, and here's a photograph of me just before Christmas with my nephew and niece. And I didn't realize this photograph was taken. And a month later was my birthday, and my nephew and niece in this photograph showed up with a card. And on the front of the card was this photograph. And I looked at it for what seemed like minutes, but was probably about 15, 20 seconds, looking and wondering, why would my niece and nephew give me a card with a picture of them on it with a guy I didn't know? And I didn't realize this was me because I didn't look in the mirror at all. And I did not ever let pictures be taken of me. And I was unaware of this picture until after it was taken. And I couldn't believe it was me. And you'd think that that kind of realization would change things. Fast forward one more year, and here I am with my other nephew on my lap, December, right around Christmas again. And you can see just how much larger I had become. The reason I'm sharing these pictures of me being obese is because you're seeing I'm sharing with you the representation of how I felt on the inside, which was manifesting on the outside with my lifestyle of avoidance, denial, fear, isolation, etc. That basically was just intense suffering, and I didn't know how to cope with it. So I was doing very destructive things. So between 2001 and 2006, I gained 150 pounds from drinking, having an awful diet, and being very sedentary, which did not help my overall health, nor did it help my dystonia. So while dystonia wasn't killing me, my lifestyle was. Here I was at 35 years old, on the verge of having a stroke or heart attack or something else, pre-diabetes, etc. Here I am again, former athlete, in great shape, physically active, to being potentially very, very sick above and beyond my dystonia. But I had to make a change, and I didn't really know how. But there was a turning point. In December, right after that picture was taken, I developed a stomach virus for about 10 days to 2 weeks, and it saved my life. And the reason why is because during that 2-week period of time, I was either in bed or the bathroom. I couldn't eat, you couldn't drink, I couldn't eat, and I couldn't really move much. I was alone with my thoughts. So I asked myself, Tom, what are you going to do when you get over this stomach virus? And the question really terrified me because I knew that I had to face myself and I had to face the intense suffering I was experiencing, and I did not want to do it. But I said to myself, as corny as this may seem, either get busy living or get busy dying, because I was dying and I just felt like I was existing and I wasn't doing anything with my life, and I needed to do something. I had to make some kind of a change. So I decided, while laying in bed, that I wanted to try and make a life for myself. So here's what I did. I stopped drinking, and I got rid of all the foods that put weight on. So pizza, fried food, sandwiches, breads, grains, sugar, pasta, processed foods. And I replaced them with fruits, vegetables, meats, eggs, nuts, fruit, protein smoothies. You may want to call something like this a paleo diet. It's not really a true paleo diet, but this is kind of what it was. And I never really followed an actual diet per se. I just went back to eating the way I used to. I used to work in a patient education company for chiropractic and nutrition. So that was the focus of my life 6 years prior to developing this. So you can see how horrible it must have been for me to have all this experience and knowledge about proper healthy lifestyle and to not be able to live that way because the suffering was so intense that I chose to eat as poorly as I did and to drink to medicate, because the pain was brutal and nothing was helping at the time. So no treatments were of any help. I then also began to walk every day, not for my dystonia. And in fact, walking kind of hurt it a little bit, but I wanted to lose the weight. And I figured if I walk a little bit, which I did, and I started by walking to the end of my driveway and back for a week, the end of my street and back for a week, and eventually got to about 2 miles twice a day. I also did the spasmodic torticollis recovery program, exercise, stretching, nutrition, massage, pain tool program that some of you or many of you are familiar with. That's located in New Mexico. That clinic program was very helpful for me in many regards to get my symptoms under better control. I also really focused on calming my mind with meditation, prayer, affirmations, progressive muscle relaxation, visualization, breathing exercises, and oftentimes a combination of these different things. And while this is a very physical condition, we all know the mental toll it can take on us. And what I have found over the years is that I had to first come to terms with what I was dealing with and understand that I had to really work on my mind before I could really effectively more work on my body. So that was key for me. So here I am now, August 2017, years later with my same nephew. And here's a side-by-side photograph of the two of us. I wanted to kind of do a comparison. For my own interest, one day I decided to do a picture of the two of us about 11 years apart, and just to see how different I had looked and how I had changed. And you can see the person on the right clearly much healthier and happier, genuinely happy with what his life has become. And I'll share with you the things I did to get to where it was in this picture and where I am now. I've also was on a weight loss book. This is actually a shameless plug, actually, for my brother, David Seaman, who's written a bunch of nutrition books and is just very, very, very knowledgeable in this area. And he wrote a book about weight loss. And if you're dealing with weight, I would really encourage you to get this book. It's a really quick, easy read. It's not scientific or anything like that. And it really talks about why it is that we eat the way we do, why the brain is programmed to eat. He calls it the eating beast within, and how we can learn to tame that to control our weight. So this is a really good book. It's really cheap on Amazon. It's like 99 cents for the Kindle and I think 10 bucks for the paperback. So I share this not for the shameless plug. That was a joke. I share this because I wanted to show the picture of me on the cover as a representation of all the hard work I put in to get to where I am now, that I can actually be on the cover of a weight loss book when I was morbidly obese and pre-diabetic many years prior. So what was the key mindset for my change? I had to learn to embrace the suffering that I was ignoring and avoiding and denying. And I came up with these three little phrases. I had to learn to face it in order to embrace it, so that I could erase it. Now, not to erase my problems or anything, but to erase the hold it was having on me and the pain and the suffering I was feeling. I had to embrace the suffering rather than run from it. And it's what I call embrace the suck of life. I became a life coach back in 2012 to help people with chronic health conditions. And I was talking to a client one day who was saying how much everything was horrible in her life and it was terrible. And she was very resistant to so many things that were happening. And I just blurted out, you need to learn to embrace the suck of life. Now, I had never said that before, and I had never heard that term before, but some of you may be familiar with the term embrace the suck, which is actually a military term that I never even knew existed. But what I did is I looked it up before I actually wrote an article about this and a chapter in one of my books about this whole topic. But I looked it up and I had never heard it phrased the way I phrased it, but I did come across embrace the suck, which is the same thing as embrace the suck of life. So what exactly does this mean? It means acknowledging that life is hard and is filled with pitfalls, be it dystonia, pain, or anything else. Life is just difficult. It's hard. And we have to come to terms with the fact that it's hard. It's a hard road for a lot of us. So what I said to myself is, okay, Tom, you are going through one of the darkest storms of your life. I had to just simply first acknowledge that in the beginning. That's what got me going. And then it also means not resisting bad things that happen to us. So rather than being reactionary to tough things, I begin to ask myself, how do I work through this? One moment at a time, one day at a time. And my working phrase when tough things happen is, how do I make the best of a difficult situation? And that's what helps me stay more grounded rather than reactionary and emotional, which ramps up my symptoms and also depletes me of energy. So this is where I try to get my mind where I'm not reactive, but more responsive to tough times. It also means not fighting things that will only fight back and increase our suffering. So for me, I like to say, all right, this situation is really tough, but what is it teaching me? There's a lesson here. And even if I don't find out that lesson, if I take on this mindset, this helps me deal and manage with the daily challenges of dystonia, pain, and everything else. So I like to go this way versus this is horrible, I hate this, why me? I like to ask, why not me? And that helps me sort of shift my mindset into one that's more proactive, where I can find a solution versus becoming a victim. So embrace the suck of life really kind of means tough times are not to be ignored, denied, covered up, or masked with drugs, alcohol, food, poor relationships, and behavior where we deal with hard times in an emotionally reactive fashion. So as I mentioned, I wrote an article about this. If you want to check it out, you can go to my website, which is tomseaman.com. It expands more on this particular topic, and you can take a look at that if you'd like. This is a quote from the book that I had mentioned. This is the second book that I wrote. Despite the challenges we all face, the biggest and most complex obstacle we will ever have to personally overcome is our own mind. We are not responsible for everything that happens in life, but we are responsible for the self-defeating thinking patterns undesirable experiences might create. I didn't take that responsibility early on, and you saw in those photographs and my descriptions as to what happened to my life and how brutal it was and how hard it was for me to get back into some sort of a life that I could be proud of. So I like this image as a way to kind of describe the way life is. Life's really hard. It's kind of like hugging a cactus. We all like to be hugged. Most of us like hugs, at least. It's a very soothing, healing thing for us. I heard an acronym one time for the word hugs, which was HUGS, helps us grow spiritually. So I've always been a fan of hugs anyway, but sometimes we have to hug things that are painful. But the more we hold on to it, and we just kind of allow it to be what it is, the less the prickly cactus is going to feel. So early on, what did I embrace? As I mentioned, food, alcohol, isolation. I tried to hide from my pain. I didn't know back then how to embrace the suck of it all, and it really did. So I embraced anxiety, depression, and avoidance instead. And as I mentioned, I lived the life of a victim. And when I changed my mindset, my lifestyle and my mindset, this was the physical transformation that took place, as was this physical transformation right here. And this is from, these pictures are from 2001 to 2021. So the bottom right picture, I pretty much maintain that sort of appearance right now. But again, we all know that there's much more than meets the eye. So just because you may not be symptomatic, looking on the inside, how you feel is very different. How I feel on the inside, I feel like I'm being strangled constantly. I feel like my head is often being pulled off my neck. I feel pain in my shoulders and my back and my neck. Not as severe as it used to be, but I feel all these things. I fatigue very quickly. I've got maybe 3 different curves in my spine. I've got a rotated C2, bulging discs, herniated discs, all sorts of things going on that create all sorts of issues. When I lay down, I have trouble with my neck spasming when that used to be my comfort spot. So things have changed over the years with my symptoms in different ways, and I'm always working on every single day. So one of my clients said to me, dystonia is like a moving target, which I thought was a great description for it, because it's almost like once you kind of figure something out, something else starts to happen. And I need to figure that one out. And there's always something happening and changing. It's kind of an ebb and flow experience all the time. So for me, I've had to modify my approach. People say to me oftentimes, they ask me, what has helped you the most, which I'm going to go through, by the way. What helps you most? And what has helped me maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago could be different than it is now. So it depends on where I was at the particular stage of my journey of dystonia and what helped me at that time. And every day it's still changing. So I'll go through some of that in a little bit. So I had to, as I've been saying, I had to learn to be okay with what I viewed as not okay. And then take action. So I had to acknowledge, come to terms with, accept whatever word is palatable to you. I had to, for me, it's had to come to terms with the fact that this isn't okay, but I have to learn to be okay with this in order to work through this. Otherwise, I'm resisting what is. It's almost like your hair turning gray. Well, you're getting wrinkles, you get older, whatever it might be. It's just part of how life is, and we have to learn to be okay and not allow them to take us down. So here are the things that have helped me most with my dystonia. Oral medications, primarily benzodiazepines. Dystonia targeted exercises. I mentioned the ST clinic earlier. A lot of stretching, massage, trigger point tools, posture work, core work, and muscle strengthening. I've also removed a lot of toxicity from my internal and external environment. Internal, of course, referring to the foods I put into my body, and then, of course, the external being everything outside of me, other people, environments, etc. I'll have to be careful also about what overstimulates my senses. I am an HSP, and for those of you not familiar with that, that is something called a highly sensitive person. And a lot of people with dystonia, I have found, are very sensitive to various stimuli, be it noise, lights, movements, people talking. For me, just having a television on at the same time someone's having a conversation is system overload. So noisy restaurants can be problematic, and other situations. And so I have to be very careful of my environment and the people in that environment. I also had to learn to change my lifestyle to fit the new me. I couldn't try and force my old life into the new one where I was physically unable to function. So I had to, and this is all part of coming to terms with it and changing ourselves to adapt to who we are now in terms of our level of ability with the challenges that we're experiencing with our symptoms. And a really good balance of activity, movement, and rest. I didn't spell movement right. Oh, well. Regarding movement, I think, is one of the most important things, and I hope this comes through. I'm not sure how these slides are coming across, so I'm hoping they're coming through okay as I'm saying them. This one is a little video. I happened to walk into my parents' house one day and turn the corner, and I saw what I'm hoping is viewing and showing. I saw my mom, who at the time, my parents will both be 87 this year, my mom in a couple of weeks and my father in September. Here's my mom doing her daily exercises on the floor. She was not very happy with the view and the angle at which I took this, but I pleaded with her to let me share this because here she is, 85 years old, and she's moving. And I know movement for a lot of us is very difficult, but movement, the body's designed to move. And movement can be one of the best things for a movement disorder, in my opinion. But you have to find the right kind of movement for you. And the thing about movement is this: when you're dealing with pain, we have something in the body called nociceptors, or pain receptors. And when we are inflamed and we don't move much, and we are dealing with emotional type issues, depression, anxiety, fear, anger, etc., it creates inflammatory chemistry, which turns on the nociceptive system in the body, or the pain system. When we get involved in movement and other activities, we stimulate something called mechanoreceptors. And mechanoreceptors can help to reduce pain levels. So movement can be very helpful. Even if you're maybe in a wheelchair or laying in bed, you can still maybe do things just to move your hands and maybe toss a ball back and forth or squeeze a ball or something. Any kind of movement can be very helpful to the body and also to the brain. Now, during COVID, I need to share this because during COVID, my parents were, like most of us, locked in the house. But my parents would go to this local river every day where they had this beautiful boardwalk, and they would go for a walk. It was very healing for my parents, especially my mom. It really is what saved her. So she was there one day, and she said to my father, "I wonder if I can still run." And she began to run. Now, she's not going to be sprinting, but I was pulling out of their house one day, and she said, "I'm going to show you how I can run, Tom." And she ran from the top of their driveway down to her house. So I want to show that video to you, and I hope it shows. So here she is, 85 years old at the time, running down the driveway. And it's hard to see, but at the very end, she's going to put her fist up in the air, just like Rocky when he ran up the stairs in Philadelphia. So that's my mom, 85 years old, out there still doing it and running and moving. Not to be outdone. Here's my father. I happened to catch him one day walking by this room. I don't live with them anymore, by the way. I did move in with them for a while, but I happened to be visiting one day, and I moved in. I was walking by, And so my dad, he was watching TV, he'd get up and do a couple exercises, and here he is lifting a couple of weights, just still moving, still being active. So movement in and of itself is a very healthy thing at any stage in your life, regardless of what you have going on. But again, it's all about what you can do and what you find to be helpful within your range of ability. So more of the things that helped me is removing a lot of the stress triggers from my life. That was a really key thing, and I'm still working on that, and I will be to the day I die. That's something that's really difficult for us to work on. And I'm going to go over stress a little bit later in the program in more detail and why it's so important. Setting boundaries was also critical and is critical for me to do so without judgment and guilt from others, because it's tough for us to say no sometimes and to not be there for people, but we need to be there for ourselves just as much, if not more, sometimes when we're having a really tough time, and set those boundaries and allow the people in that are going to lift us up and not bring us down and create more stress and anxiety and pain and more of a need for physical and emotional exertion. So setting boundaries are critical. Having a good attitude and sense of humor is also really important. We need to kind of laugh at the follies of life, and even at this dystonia, which really stinks, but sometimes we have to kind of laugh at how silly and crazy it can be. Also, letting go of the things that I can no longer do has been critical. Had to then learn to fully embrace all the things that I can do. And the key thing is to stop comparing my life before dystonia to what it is now, because that is completely unfair to me and also completely illogical, because I was dealt with this horrible case that left me floor ridden. How could I possibly be the same person I was? But I fought to try and be the same person. And when I did that, it made me even worse. So I had to stop comparing my life before. And what I began to do was I compared myself every day. And I still do this. I compare myself every single day with me during my darkest years. And I always try to be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday and every day prior. I'm not always successful, but I try to be a better version of myself. And it's all about growth and learning. And that's the attitude I've taken on, which has helped me so much. Focusing on now, not what once was, like I mentioned, and acknowledge all the efforts and the accomplishments that we make every day, no matter their size. And if you're so bad off that you can merely just get out of bed to get breakfast and go back to bed, acknowledge yourself for that. And hopefully with more treatments and other types of things, you'll be able to do even more. But acknowledge every single effort you make, because it would be so easy to just give up and not do anything at all whatsoever, but acknowledge every single thing you do. And helping others is such a huge thing as well, because it helps, for one, to take the focus off of us and can give us a new perspective about what we're going through, and also can increase some what are called the feel-good hormones, like oxytocin is one of them. That's the love hormone, but I was referring to serotonin, dopamine, endorphins. Those are the hormones we want to try and create. And being helpful to others is a really great way of doing that, which is why these support groups are so wonderful and why it's so critical for us to come together to help each other in any way we possibly can. I've also learned to not look at myself as a victim, but again, as a student, to learn life lessons. And that was a shift in my mind that I had to take. And here's a quote that I love that says, "Victim status embodies all that I reject about the struggles of life. The challenge is to live and function well under all circumstances, including those never anticipated, like illness." And that's something I never expected would happen to me, that I'd develop a chronic illness. Didn't even really realize what that was until I developed one. And having a support system, of course, is critical, as we all know. So family, friends, and in-person and online support groups, just like this right here. Some of us don't have family or friends in our corner, but we do have these in-person and online support groups that are so critical. And again, to acknowledge Martha and everyone else out there that is involved in support groups, either running one or as a member or just participant, whatever it might be. That is such an important component. And I'm going to share something real quick with you here. This is a support group that I was a member of in my town several years ago. However, this is a support group for people with essential tremor. I don't have essential tremor. I have just straight up cervical dystonia. a friend of mine with dystonia, cervical dystonia, he had a friend who had essential tremor, and he was looking for ways to help this guy out. So he found a local group, and he kind of recruited me to be a support for him and his friend to try and get this guy to go to this group to see if it might be of help to him. So the three of us went one day, and the guy with the essential tremor didn't seem to really jive with him and didn't like it much. So he decided to not go anymore. And my friend with dystonia had only planned on coming to that one visit, and he didn't come back. But I continued with the group. I found a lot of camaraderie with these people, even though they all had a different movement disorder. They had the same doctors. They saw the same doctors. They were getting similar treatments. More than anything, they were dealing with all of the emotional things, relationship changes, family changes, work changes. I mean, everything we feel, depression, isolation, fear, judgment from everything that we were feeling, they were experiencing. So I found a kinship with this group. So if you live in an area and you want to get together with people and discuss dystonia, if you don't have a support group for that, maybe try one for a different type of movement disorder and see if that might be something that would fit for you. Because this for me was a great fit, even though we had a totally different condition. This was a group for me that was very helpful. So wanted to share that. I also use a lot of tools for pain and spasms. My favorite is probably the Theracane, which I know a lot of you are familiar with. It's also known as the shepherd's crook and back buddy. In fact, I have my, wait, hang on. I went way, whoa. Something happened here. I'm sorry for this. Sorry. Whoa. I'm really sorry about this. I just wanted to show you my shepherd's crook, and I went through everything, and there we are. Okay, so here's my shepherd's crook. I use it on my back, primarily putting pressure and pulling it. It really helps, especially when I'm sitting for too long. It helps to keep those muscles that are sore from tightening up and also reducing some of the pain. So I have this thing with me quite a bit, and I'm really sorry. Hopefully we're back on the correct slide. Regarding more dystonia treatments and therapies, I did a video on YouTube that you can check out for going into way more detail about the variety of different treatments and therapies available to us. For me, primarily the physical ones, as I mentioned, was movement therapy as well as medications. I've not done well with some of the other more traditional treatments for dystonia, so I've had to find other things as well. And also dealing with the emotional side of things as well has been a critical component. And as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to go into stress a bit because I really learned that managing my stress and emotions were absolutely critical, because the culmination, I'll just read this slide here, the culmination of stress is like a wave quietly rising from the sea, crashing over your head before you know what hit you. We don't realize oftentimes the amount of stress that we have within us that's building up until it just crushes us like this massive wave coming in. So we need to be very mindful of the various stress triggers that we have and the various stressors we have around us. And it all comes down to mindfulness type things, which I'm going to go over in a bit here. So here's why it's so important, because intense stress and negative emotions like anger, shame, fear, a lot of things I've been talking about, they keep us stuck in the fight, flight, freeze, stress mode, which many of us are familiar with. What happens when we are stuck in this mode is that it creates an environment in the body where any kind of healing is almost near impossible, because the body is constantly putting out pro-inflammatory chemistry. So we've heard the terms pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, mainly as it refers to diet and injury. But our mind and the way we think can also create pro and anti-inflammatory chemistry. So depression, anger, anxiety, etc., they create the same inflammatory chemistry as does an injury. So that's something to keep in mind. So when we choose to come to terms with the reality of our lives, and again, this is about embracing the suck, and we learn to work with it and not against it, that's when we can see positive changes. So a thing about stress is just a perception and a judgment based on our own unique experiences in life. What one person may see as stressful, another person may not see as stressful. So there is no uniform, everyone is stressed by the same thing. It's how we interpret the world. So if we change our perception of life experiences, we can change the stress responses and their damaging effects on the body. So ask yourself, what causes me stress? Why does it cause me stress? And how can I look at it differently so I can reduce or stop allowing it to stress me? And here's a quote that changed my life when I heard it. When we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. This is from Wayne Dyer, who has some wonderful programs out there. I had to change my perspective, and I do every day, about various things that affect me. So changing the way we look at things will change. So I changed the way I looked at my dystonia, and I said, how can I turn this around and make good of this and learn from this? And how can I, and even in my darkest days, how can I use this to try and be a better person in any way, shape, or form possible? So this information about stress is so important because, for one, anxiety, stress, depression, and pain, they distort reality. What happens is that we have these fight or flight sensations, like I mentioned. We then, because of that, we have this distortion of reality, and we misinterpret and we catastrophize our symptoms. Then we have panic. And this panic then creates more adrenaline being produced in the body, and the cycle just continues. So we're constantly pumping out these stress hormones that can create more pain, more anxiety, more fear, more anger. So it's kind of like this. You have the person that is going through a tough time and they just run, or you have someone who misinterprets. I must be sick. I'm going insane. Maybe I'm having a stroke or a heart attack. And then Mr. Catastrophe. What if this never goes away? What if you collapse? You need to escape now. Get to a doctor. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to these feelings, as I have. I used to have severe panic attacks, and I would literally run from the situation. And I worked really hard to get through that, several years to really get through the heavy anxiety and panic I was dealing with. I'm not going to go into great detail about that, but that was something that was amplifying my stress and anxiety and panic were amplifying my dystonia symptoms. And so I had to learn to get those under control. And to be honest with you, the more I was able to do that, the more effective those were than drugs. That's how powerful the mind can be when connecting with the body. So anxiety and stress is kind of like you're sitting at home, you're relaxed in your living room, you're on your couch, but what you feel on the inside is as if a bear is at your door. That's how it feels on the inside. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. And that's why I was saying very early in this program that sometimes we think when we're feeling anxiety and panic that others can see what we feel, which is not true. But this is kind of how it could be, where you're sitting comfortably and all of a sudden in the inside, your stomach is churning because you're at the level of, your anxiety level is at that of seeing a bear. So if you want to really see what it's like to be anxious, observe the behavior of a squirrel. They're always on alert. They never blink, except the other day I saw a squirrel. I was sitting in the park with my girlfriend in the car, and there was a squirrel that was begging at the door. And I actually did see it blink. The first time I ever saw a squirrel blink, at least it appeared to, but they are always with their eyes wide open, looking for danger. So this is how people with stress, anxiety, and fear feel on the inside almost all the time, like that girl that was sitting on the couch, feeling as if she just saw a bear when there was no harm in sight. And as I mentioned, this is incredibly unhealthy for the body. And when I was able to work through this and improve upon this, it, like I said, was as powerful as a drug. So what we want to do, though, we want to create the healing cycle. So we're in pain. If we become simply mindful of the pain, which means we become just simply aware of the pain, we don't judge it good or bad or get angry about it, we don't have an emotional reaction to it, we just become mindful of the pain. That creates less muscle tension. And as we know, with dystonia, we have muscle tension all the time. That's critical for us to have less muscle tension. So the more we can do to get there, the better. We don't want to feed the dystonia and the muscle tension. So become mindful and aware of it. Less muscle tension as a result, then we have less stress and anxiety. Then our distortion of reality is minimized, and we can then choose what we do next more wisely. We then hopefully will result in less pain and feel more in control and a greater sense of well-being. And that top one is so important for us because we live in bodies that are moving on their own without our control. And anything we can do to feel more in control gives us a sense of confidence and a greater sense of well-being. So practicing things that can get us into this healing cycle is very, very helpful. So if you're someone who deals with anxiety and stress, breathe and do your best to slow down your mind, because if there is no fire, there is no reason to run the water. And running of the water is just the same as the person sitting on their couch imagining they just saw a bear when there's no danger in sight. An affirmation I like to use to help me through this is I relax into the flow of life and life flows through me with ease. The word flow for me is a very helpful word. Flow, rhythm, melting, ease, those words for me, they evoke a feeling within me that helps me to kind of relax. So I'll even change these words around. If I'm having trouble sleeping, I'll say I relax into the flow of sleep and sleep flows through me with ease. Or I relax into the flow of pain and pain flows through me with ease. I got this from Louise Hay, by the way. She wrote a book called You Can Heal Your Life and has a lot of affirmations in there. But I've used this one to really help me get through these times when it's just, I feel overwhelmed. So how do we break away from stress? Many, many things. It's different for all of us, but here are some ideas: massage, acupuncture for some people, movies and books, prayer, positive thinking, affirmations, meditation, exercise, music, dancing, breathing, mindfulness activities. A good regular sleep-wake cycle, which is kind of tough for those of us with dystonia. Probably one of the hardest things for most of us is that because of our symptoms. But the more we can do that, that can help to reduce stress. So if you can get into a good routine, that can be helpful. So things like, shopping and hobbies, whatever those hobbies might be that you enjoy are helpful to break away and to, again, be mindful of something and living in the moment. It's all about living in the moment and spending time with family and friends, and support groups as well, of course. Doing good deeds. Good deeds are really helpful as well. There was a study done years ago that I heard about. I don't have the information on it in terms of a paper or anything, but they were studying the serotonin levels in people that were doing good deeds for others. And they were measuring how much the serotonin levels increased for the person doing the good deed and the person that was on the receiving end of the good deed, as well as people observing the good deed. And what they found is that the serotonin increased in the person doing the good deed and the person receiving it, but also the people observing it. So kindness and caring go a long, long way for helping people, kind of like I was saying before about hugs. They help us grow spiritually. And apparently, if you hug somebody for 21 seconds or 22 seconds, that's when you, I think, release oxytocin or something like that. I forget the exact number, but all these different things can be so beneficial to us. And we all know being around animals for a lot of us is incredibly helpful. Hot tub, sauna, biofeedback, good nutrition, anti-inflammatory foods, vitamin D in the form of sunlight or supplements is also very helpful. Good for pain as well, by the way. Laughter is also a key thing to break away from stress. Even fake laughter works because the brain doesn't know the difference between real laughter and fake laughter. And the key thing for me is I've had to develop a healthy relationship with my pain. I had to learn, as crazy as it sounds, I had to learn to become friends with my dystonia and my pain. I had to learn to work with it and not look at it as an adversary, which is how I did for years. I couldn't look at it as something outside of me because it's a part of who I am and part of it's just part of me, like a lot of other things. So I had to come to terms with it like anything else about myself and not resist what is, because that will make us suffer more when we do that. So also really important to understand, and I added this at the very end at the very beginning, actually, before we started, anxiety, stress, and depression, it creates chemistry in the body where we actually are more susceptible to pain, which is why these things are so critical to try and get under control. So we have to stop fighting against things. When we choose to stop being angry, and a lot of us are very angry about our situation, We give the body a better chance to heal because we create that internal environment of peace and harmony. And being angry isn't going to do a whole lot unless it's a motivating factor for change, because it's not going to take away our pain. It's going to actually increase pain in most cases. So be very careful about your emotional reaction to things. And this is a quote from my book. We can't change anything until we accept it. So again, coming to terms with things. We have to stop saying life shouldn't be this way or that way. It should be this way because it is this way. And we have to stop resisting what is, move forward, and make great things happen as best as we possibly can. So when we resist the flow of life, what does it look like on the inside of our body? It's like we are fighting with ourselves. And we all know just this picture alone, for me, creates tension, because it is something I don't want to be around. I don't want to be around confrontational type things and situations that get my anger up and my stress levels up. So that's what happens when we are resisting the flow of life. So how do we want to feel? We want to feel the way we do when we're at the beach. Peaceful, relaxing, the lapping waves at your feet, the beautiful sky and the clouds and the sun, or maybe the mountains. Maybe a lake in the mountains is a soothing place for you. This is the kind of, whatever feelings you get when you see these pictures are the kinds you want to create doing various activities in your life, some of which I've gone over. Maybe a sunset is something that you enjoy. And this is a picture this is actually where my mom began to run, by the way. This is the spot where she was doing her walking every day and she ran. Here's another picture of it. In fact, behind me is another picture as well. It's just a couple miles down the road. So I go there to take pictures of the sunset, which I'd love to do. So this for me is a very healing environment, a very soothing environment. I feel very grounded here. I like to capture with pictures. And what I've actually done is all the pictures that I've taken, not all, but a lot of the pictures I've taken, I've put them on my wall and replaced all the store-bought pictures so that I have pictures of nature all around me, because nature for me is very grounding. And if I can't be outside, I can bring a little bit of the outside indoors. I even have plants everywhere all over my house. So it's a little bit of a jungle in here, which to me is a very healing, comforting place. So what's really important is to understand that it is not what happens to us in life that defines us and how we feel. It's what we do with what's going on in our lives that defines us and determines our character and also how we feel. Because none of us are immune to the challenges of life. When adversity comes, how we respond to it determines what happens next. Life experiences become tragedies if we make the conscious decision to make tragedies out of them. If we choose to view all challenges as opportunities for personal growth, they can be a driving force for positive change. So we need to look at things more as opportunities than obstacles. And I know dystonia and pain and other things that come with it is a huge obstacle in many ways, but we need to try and find a way to shift our mindset into one of opportunity versus obstacles. And we kind of, it's such a cute little girl jumping in the puddle. I had to put it in here. We have to go through storms so we can play in the puddles in life. And the main component to working with our dystonia and pain, from my perspective at least, is self-care. Something a lot of us struggle with, but self-care is absolutely critical. Most of what I have done over the years, because I've not been real helpful with a lot of the treatments from doctors, is self-care in order to get myself to be as functional as I possibly can every day. And I'm going to go over what those things are that I do to give you some ideas. So self-care is so important because doctors can only do so much for us. They don't eat for us, sleep for us. They don't manage our stress. They don't choose our friends, etc. Plus, there's much more to our overall well-being than just getting treatments. So the majority of our care really must come from us. So it's a matter of being responsible for our lives and our health as much as we possibly can, and be a partner with your doctor versus just being a recipient of treatments. That can go a long way as well. And they've done studies all about that. Increased self-care, it also enhances feelings of self-empowerment and confidence, which is critical for us, again, when we have a body that's moving without our permission. So when we can feel empowered and confident and have more control, at least of the emotional things, it can help actually soothe the system that can help to reduce some of the physical symptoms that we're feeling. So we soothe our mental system to reduce the physical symptoms. Now, for each of us, we have all different types of puzzle pieces that help us. Some things will and some things won't. So I'm going to share some of the things that have helped me. Some of these things may make you worse, may aggravate things. They might help you. Hopefully they'll give you some ideas for things you can try. So for me, it means eating well, exercise, quality sleep, stress management, massage, healthy relationships, quieting my mind with meditation, prayer, breathing exercises. I have a routine I go through every day when I wake up to try and get myself into a good rhythm. So I begin the day in a peaceful, calm way as much as I can, and just be very kind to my body throughout the day as well as I can. Listening to music is helpful for people, being out in nature, as I mentioned, resting by the pool, at the beach, in your yard, in your living room, wherever it is you like to rest. Let your body get a break. Dealing with pain is exhausting mentally and physically. So the more we can take a break, the better it is. Refraining from activities and events that overtax our bodies is critical. So that means setting boundaries and respecting our boundaries, regardless of what others think. We have to really be confident and comfortable with what we know that we need to do in order to not make things worse than they are. For me, I need to shut off my computer and phone to take mental breaks, because for me, technology can be very physically draining. Reading books and movies and TV shows can be helpful also. Not beating ourselves up for not being the person we once were. We need to embrace who we are now. And the more we embrace who we are now, the more we can work with ourselves to work beyond the suffering and pain and other things that we're experiencing. And avoiding toxic people and spending time with people that lift us up is also critical, which is why these support groups are so great, because the people in them are so loving and caring and wonderful. Now, a lot of people do struggle with self-care. So if you do, treat yourself like someone else you are responsible for taking care of, and then give the same care to yourself that you would give to a loved one. And try to stop hurrying around to be there for everyone else all the time. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, but start hurrying to be there for yourself, and then breathe and reconnect with yourself if you can. So many of us are people pleasers. We want and we do a lot for others, but we need to also take time for ourselves and know that it's not selfish. And the fact the people that we do so much for usually want us to do more of that for ourselves, but we struggle with that. And I just want to let you know you have permission to stop, slow down, and take care of you, because you are just as important as everybody else. If you want to learn more about some self-care ideas, I have a video on YouTube that you can check out. I have a whole YouTube channel called Dystonia Living that has a whole bunch of videos. So if you want to check that out, feel free. The key thing about taking care of ourselves, it's not selfish, and saying no is a big part of that. We have to learn to be okay with the fact that we can't do everything and we can't please everyone. So when we set boundaries and give more to ourselves, we can give a better version of ourselves to other people. Because people get the best of you when you give yourself the best of you. And this is a really hard one for a lot of us, but the more we practice it, the better we get at doing it, and the more effective we can implement that into our lives to help us. And then it makes us better for other people. No matter what you're going through, please don't ever lose hope, because the day we give up, the day after might be the very day that our life changes. And I'd love to include this little guy in here with the helmet on, going for the cheese, about never giving up. Been trying, figuring out how to get there without getting hurt. And he's got the helmet on, he's gonna get that cheese one day. Don't ever give up, no matter what you're going through. There's always hope. There's always people out there that are willing to help and do things. Don't give up, please. Because the dystonia diagnosis, it is not the definition of your life. It is not the book of your life. It is one chapter of your life among many, many other chapters. I've met some of the most amazing people since I've had this condition. And I'm so grateful for that, as well as so many other things from going through this. And I've realized that this is not my life. It may take over a lot of my life, but it's not my entire life. There's so much more. So while it can alter the course of your life from subtle to dramatic ways, it need not be how you define yourself. It is not what happens to us in life that defines it. It is what we do with it that defines us. So for me, I said to myself, I don't know why this happened or why I'm going through this, but I absolutely refuse to go through this for nothing. And I had to find some meaning and purpose in my life. So how did I find meaning and purpose with this? as I began to gain better control, I decided to go back to school. I originally was going to school for my degree in counseling when I got sick. So I went back to school for a couple of years and got certified as a life coach to work with people, more of a health coach, really, to work with people that are going through a lot of different health challenges. I've become an author, a speaker, and a very active patient advocate as well. These are different places, among others. I've been published. I'm not sharing this to say, hey, look at me, I'm great on this, because I'm not that kind of person at all. I'm actually quite humble, and I don't even like to even say this. I'm sharing this with you because I was once a guy that was twisted with my neck in misery, drinking god awful alcohol all day long, eating horrible food, thinking life was over, wanting to commit suicide, afraid to leave his house. Worked through all of it with a lot of the things that I share, which is really only just a small snippet of the things that I've done and that I do, but hopefully a good overview to be able to now, give back and pay forward really a lot of the things that I have been given, the many gifts that I've been given. And again, my mom and dad, I wouldn't be here without them for what they did for me. So again, hope you guys got connected and you're watching, because I love you and I wouldn't be here without you. I've also written 2 books to try and help people as well. And if you have them, I hope you enjoy them and they're helpful. And if you don't, if you get them, great. If not, that's okay too. But they're out there. Learning as much as we can is, I think, really, really helpful. I gobbled everything up when I first got this to try and figure out what to do and how to navigate this. But there was so little information, I didn't really know what to do. So I wanted to kind of fill that void a bit. So for meaning and purpose, if you can't figure out your purpose, figure out what your passion is. Your passion will lead you right into your purpose. For me, my passion is helping other people. So I couldn't sit by idly anymore. I had to figure out how I could be of service to others if possible, which kind of leads me to this final quote here. So using your gifts in the service of others can help you find your true purpose. Thank you very much, Martha, and everyone who's here for having me. If you want to contact me with any questions or anything at all, ever, literally 24/7, that's my website. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. Those are my books. But if you want to contact me anytime, I am here to help in any way possible. So reach out anytime. And thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. It's hard to kind of talk just to a screen and not see people. So hopefully this came across well, and you found some little tidbits that you can use going forward. So Martha, thank you again. And I'm going to give this right back to you now.